now that we've started and decided what our paint technique process will be to paint the marble, we need to now go in and decipher what our colors and our color choices will be for this project. So going back to my sample, I had chosen a very gray and white uh, sample of marble so that all of my hues are in the similar value range of this same sort of gray color. Now, whenever I look at this, I need to create some adjectives in order to look at how I would describe this marble, not its texture. We've already talked about that, but now we need to talk about adjectives to describe its color. Now, right off the bat, whenever I look at this feels warm to me. It has a warmth to it. Where this blue is cold in its nature, this has a warmth to it. So I'm probably going to try to create a shades of gray or different hues of gray that are in warm tones. All right, that's my first thought. I know I need almost a pure white, not quite, just cut down slightly. I don't use any black. There's no black in this anywhere. But I will mix black in with white to create my various grays. The challenge now is actually, how do I get that first adjective of warmth? How do I make a warm gray? From my experience, the other thing I can look at this is I'm going to find out what color is in this that would be warm. So in my warm tones, those are typically colors like red, yellow, into the warm browns. A lot of browns have red in them. There are greens and there are blues that are technically warm, but they typically overall fall onto the cool side of things. So we know we're going to be on the color wheel side of the warm colors of yellow, orange, red, that kind of spectrum, and then we kind of fall into that pie shape on the color wheel that is into the brown tones in there. Those are all the warm colors. So whenever I look at my color palette, I will probably look at something like a burnt umber. Burnt umber is a nice warm brown, has a lot of red in it. It's a nice milk chocolatey brown, but it has some warm flavor to it, warm color to it. When I look at white, this is my pure white. It's neither warm nor cool. All right, same thing goes with my black. It doesn't feel warm or cool. It just is on itself. So even putting these together, I'm not going to get any warmth or cool to it. Just my own interpretation of if it feels warm or cool based off its value. But to actually get something like this, I might look at this brown mixed in with my white and my black in order to get sort of a warmth to it. Now, this is not brown. This is gray. So I might need to cut this, meaning if you remember on our color wheel, if we mixed red and we go across the color wheel to green, we can get our various values of browns in the middle. And then right smack in the middle, we get sort of a gray. Remember that? So we don't get black in the middle like we think of when we think of our color wheel. We get a gray. So I could go green, but I find that going with something like a burnt umber and a phthalo blue, I tend to get, because I'm dealing with a warm and a cool, I tend to get a gray that is more workable with my white and my black. All right, so you can see my process here. What I'm looking at is I'm trying to figure out, how do I mix this color? Now, if you don't know, you need to look at your own marble and just start looking at it. And if your marble is on the red side or if it's on the blue side, you need to start with that basic color, your first impression. If your first impression says my marble is greenish, My marble is red-ish. My marble is gray-ish. I need to start with that and look at the colors of paint that you have and find where is the one that is the most similar, right? And that was typically what you're going to begin with. You're going to build upon that to create what value inside of the color wheel is closer, and that means adding more of its complement. It might mean adding more of its analogous colors too, depends on how you need to work that color to get closer to this. You may need to work with its shade and its tint, depending on how where it is in the color wheel as well. It might need to be lighter. It might need to be darker. All right. So that is the next step, is you're going to be playing with your color wheel and this whole palette of colors that is on this drawing. So, or on this painting or photograph, whatever is your sample board, your sample image, and work with a little swatch. I've put in the colors I've talked about. So I have my black and my white, and I have my burnt umber and my phthalo blue as a little dab on my little palette here. What I also have is I have a second little tin here, a little plastic container that whenever I put over this, I can see through it. I like these little clear plastic ones because then I can see through it to my artwork below. And this allows me to paint on top and compare my mixing of color with the actual artwork underneath without destroying the artwork. Does that make sense? So you could use a little container like this, a little food container. You could use a piece of plastic, put some plastic down, like this is a little plastic bag. If you have acetate, which is the old acetate paper, which you would use for a slide projector or an overhead projector, you could actually draw on acetate and project. Sometimes I get that material and lay on top to test my paint. I also can move my little swatch around to see how it compares with different areas of my sample. All right. So imagine we've received this sample here of marble from our set designer, and now we need to decipher the color. All right. So I've got my palette here. I'm just going to use a little flat brush here. This is like a little filbert brush. I also have a little tub of my medium, my flat medium, and I have a little container of water on the side. I've got a little towel here I'll use to kind of wipe it off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of the medium. I probably use quite a bit of medium because I find that I use more glazes, or at least glazy paint, whenever I'm painting marble than I do straight paint. Because we're doing layers, we don't want opaque paint. We don't want to paint it and then paint over it and lose everything we did before. So we want our paint to have translucency and transparency to it so that we can see through it and the light can reflect back and give it sort of a glow. So we're going to use a lot of glaze, a lot of our clear flat glaze. And I'm going to start with a little bit of white and a touch of black. We're going to be careful with our black. Black is a very powerful color. All right. Now I have a gray. I have a light gray. And just in general, looking from here to there, let's just look at that, okay? Use my other container. If I put this on, yes, it's a gray, and it's slightly warm, but it's not this gray. This gray automatically next to this looks warmer and looks browner to me, all right? Let's see if I can reflect and get the reflection off of this. So if I move it a little bit. As far as I'm concerned, this in its value range is close, but in its hue is incorrect. So I'm going to add a little bit of my burnt umber to this mix. That's going to warm it up quite a bit. I'm going to mix this all around. All right, let's just see what that looks like. We still got our very glazy color. It definitely went more brown. Let's put that next to this. Let's try that. So these two, this is definitely more brown. And this is definitely more cooler. This is just straight black and white. It's just a very dull, plain gray, where this is a little more, more of a nice, richer brown color. This to me looks closer to this than this one. Now, as I move things around, I might find that this here might work in different areas. So these combination, but I'm already comfortable knowing that my black, my white, and my burnt umber choice was pretty comfortable with this. I know I'm in the value range that I need it to be. So what happens if I add just a touch of my phthalo blue in the mix? All right, so this is going to take that brown, this burnt umber, it's going to kind of knock it down a bit. It's not going to be so brown. And now it's going to look a little more gray. Let's compare that. Oh, I like that. That's the color. So if you can see how I'm playing with my paint, just doing a little sample. I'm not using very much paint. We don't use everything, but this allows me to kind of test my paint to see what was my combination, how much paint did I use, and be able to, before I actually go to my actual surface. All right. So what was our first step? We said our first step was going to be a wash. What is a wash? Well, a wash is a lot of water and our paint mix. So in this case, I'm going to take that same mix of paint we just made, and I'm going to add a lot of water to it so that it is very washy, just like the name says. So I'm going to add a little bit of white. I'm going to add, make sure I have plenty of medium in there. I'm going to add just that touch of black. Maybe a touch more. Just a touch of our burnt umber. Pull that in there. And to kill the burnt umber a little bit, I add a little bit of the blue. A little bit more blue. So now I'm getting that gray color that I wanted. And it's very washy. It's kind of paint. So I might actually add more water. And I'm just going to make, just like our scumble we did, I'm going to move that all around in a very washy manner, maybe even more water, so that it's very washy, very much like a almost just watercolory, but just let this be all over. Let it kind of move around on its own. All right. If you notice here, what I've done is I've taken my 11 by 17 page and I've divided it in half for our two techniques this week and put a piece of tape down the middle. I forgot to mention that, but you can, that way you can divide up your page and have it prepared for these two assignments. All right, so you can see this is, I've just put a light tone of this wash on top. It's definitely not the white. It now has some color on it. I might add a little bit more thickness to the paint areas, almost like our scumble. But that just to kind of give some variation to this. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I don't want it to be flat and even. I want this to kind of be organic, more rocky, minerally, you know, almost like there's, I might actually take my brush and kind of drag it even through some places just to kind of give my start of a veining technique. I put it right into the wash right from the beginning. All right. So we're going to let that dry and we'll come back with our next step in just a second. I've let this area dry for a few minutes. Used my little portable hair dryer, kind of finished it off as well. Tip right off the bat is touch your paper a little bit. If it feels cool to the touch, then this isn't dry. It should not feel cool. The coolness you would feel is the continuation of evaporation of the moisture that's still in the paper. So a little note here is if you touch your paper and it feels moist or it feels cool, then it's still damp. Let it dry all the way. Use a hair dryer or walk away, let it give us some time to finish out. All right, so we're going to move on to our next step. And if you remember that we said that from our sample, we thought that rag rolling might be the next step. If I look at my color choices here, I think that we're going with a darker shade of that same color combination we had. The whole thing still has that overall feel of that warm gray. So I'm going to use the exact same color palette, the black, the white, the burnt umber, and the phthalo blue, but I'm going to do a little more saturation on the color and on the black to give it more of a darker shade. Now, I want to remind you guys that I need to use medium here because we don't want to overpaint this to the point where it's opaque. We want to keep it somewhat transparent so that we can still see some of the color underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with that same process we did last time. We're going to add some white to our mix. I'm going to add a little more this time because I have a lot of surface to cover. Some white. I'm going to add a touch of black. Remember, black is a strong color. It changes very quickly. All right, so adding some black. I'm going to add some more to that. I'm going to go darker with this guy. So I'm going to keep very little droplets at a time. I'm going to now introduce the brown or burnt umber. Getting there, a little more. I'm going to introduce some of the blue into this mix. So now I'm going to come back to the black. I'm going to go a shade darker. All right. Definitely want to get some more darkness to this. But by doing that, I lost some of the warmth. So now I'm going to add more of the brown in. But now I have too much brown. The brown is too much. So I need to knock that down with some of this blue. Bring it back into the gray levels. All right, that is feeling pretty good. So now we need to test it. All right, so we've got our other little palette here, and we need our sample, our little paint sample, and we're going to add this to. Oh my goodness, I didn't even first go. Already feels right for all those darker areas, right? So let's look at this up here. It almost looks like if I were to point this area out, like it blends right into the two, and you can realize what's underneath. So that I feel very confident in. All right, so I'm going to add some medium to my color mix to get some body to it. You know, basically try to make it a little more paint. And I can add a little bit more to that. All right, so more of that. And I'm going to add a touch of water. I'm not going to add too much. And I may have to adjust this as we go. So I'm going to kind of make sure and wipe my brush off. And I'll move my sample away because I don't want to destroy it. And now I've taken, this time I've chosen just some paper towel because I feel like this is pretty crinkly in its look. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll this into my paint. And I'm going to begin doing some rag rolling on here. Let's see what we can get. To get similar textures that were on our sample. I'm going to kind of massage this in a little bit and see if we can kind of move this around. Spend some time doing this. Okay, need to mix up a little bit more because I've used most of that up. So again, I'm going to add more white. Remember, we started with white. Add some of the black. Mix that pretty well. Add some of our brown, kind of warm it up a bit. bring in some of that blue to knock the brown down a little bit so it's a little more neutral. Maybe add a little more black again, kind of darken it. Probably not quite dark enough. Now remember, the black kind of neutralizes it, makes it cooler again. So I need to bring some of that brown again. Same thing with the blue. So we go back and forth between our colors to kind of bring that to the level we want. I'm comfortable with that. Got our color mix, so I'm going to add some more medium to it, kind of thicken it up, and then give it some more body. And I'm going to go back in with my rag. So same process. I'm rolling right off the page. I don't stop like right at the edge and then pull up. I try to roll right on through onto the tape. It feels like this marble has been cut out of the rock and a little more realistic. All right, so I can dab a little bit with my rag to kind of get some more texture. Looks like I got a little white there, which is fine. All right, so let's compare. So we look at our rag roll. We look at our sample. Boy, this is starting to look like all those little amoeba shapes. We're getting all those. I really like that. All right, so we're going to put that aside. We're going to dry this, and when we come back, we're going to work on to our next layer, which we decided was a wet spatter. All right, so let's let that dry and then we'll come back in just a second. So what I have is we just did our rag rolling with this thicker gray that we built up using the black, the white, the burnt umber, and the phthalo blue. I'm going to add water to this. I want to thin this out till it's just starting to run. I don't want it to be thick. I don't want anything that's going to be like a blop of paint on it. I want a wet droplet. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit of water to the same mix that we made for the rag roll. And then I'm going to wipe some of this paint off. All right, let that just kind of fall down there. I'm going to wipe it off again. And I'm liking this. It's dripping down the side of my palette here, so I'm okay with that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another paintbrush and I'm going to tap. All right, I'm getting a little bit of my droplets starting to fall. Now the issue here that I'm noticing is I have very round droplets. What that tells me is there's a lot of paint, very little water. So I'm going to add more water to my mix. Get it a little bit more watery. Okay, I might even add more. I mean, we're like I said, a wet spatter. All right, so that's running off. So now when I start to spatter, getting some variety in my droplets. They're not all just straight dots. They have a little bit of shape to them. I'm varying how hard that I'm hitting. I'm hitting a little bit more. I can even vary how far away from the surface that I want to hit so that I get more in certain areas. Right. Twisting and turning so the spatter goes a little bit different in areas. Add a little more paint to my brush. And I can, oh, that got a little, that's all right. I kind of like that. So, all right. I'm going to stop there. When I compare to this, my droplets are quite a bit larger than what I'm seeing on here. I'm going to dry this, and then I'm going to come back, and I need to now reassess if I like this or not, if this is going to work. I think it's going to be fine. I might add a step here. I actually might bring in the good old sponge and see what that looks like in areas. Because remember, we were trying to decide which of the dot making processes we wanted to use. I might, play around with my sponge up in this area to see if that looks any different while this is all still wet. That's all right. See, I'm not crazy about that either. So I think I'm going to leave it. I think it's okay. I think the spatter I have is fine. So we're going to dry this, and we're going to come back on to our next step. All right. See you in the next one. What we said for our next step, which was, we said step 4 is line work. All right. So I'm going to put away the flat brush, and I'm going to go for one of our liners. On stage, we'd have a larger Fitch brush, but I have a little round pointy brush. I'm going to dip that in my water to kind of pre-set it up. And I'm going to go in our area of our palette that has mostly white and gray a little bit, maybe mix touch of the gray into the white to kind of kill the white a bit. And I'm going to actually leave it mostly opaque, but I'm adding just a little bit of medium to it to give it some fluidity to it. I want it to be able to glide. Add a little bit of water to that, a little more paint. So I need it to be almost like an ink. Okay, the consistency of an ink. So I'm kind of pulling the brush through this. I'm going to test it here on the side just to see if it'll pull. All right, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the brush way back here in the back of the handle. This is one of those moments why you have a long handle for a paintbrush. So I want to kind of lose a little bit of control of what this brush does. So as I pull, I'm going to twist this in my fingers. See, I'm twisting back and forth, rolling it a little bit. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to kind of move my hand side to side, and I'm going to allow the brush to kind of do what it wants to do. The other thing I want to do is I want to adjust how much pressure I'm pushing down or lifting up to vary the thickness of my line. All right. So I'm just going to start off the page, come into the paper, and I'm going to start moving. I'm twisting, I'm pushing, I'm pulling, and I'm just going to make my way in sort of a random kind of line all the way across the page, kind of making sort of a lightning bolt looking thing happening here. And if you look, it's very subtle. You may not be able to even see it very well on the camera. So now I'm going to add a little more paint to it. So I've done one that's very transparent, and I'm going to come off of like a branch, like a tree branch, and add another one here. Yeah, you probably can see this one better. You see, I'm just letting it kind of roll. I might even pull on the side of the brush a little bit and give it a moment to kind of create a little vein. I can even, if I like, pull all the way using the side of the brush, almost like a very large line, and pull that across. You can see, I can see right through this. I can even see some of the gray underneath, and that I want. I might do a couple little lines here to connect the dots. Might pull off of that a little bit. All right. Head back on the first one. So I'm going to go around, and I'm just going to play around and make some lines for a while. I like to do my lines all in a direction. If I look at my research, I see there's this white line, this white area that kind of goes this direction. Same goes here. Even it's almost like there's a hidden stripe in here. And I'm sure that had to do with how this rock was formed, either in its liquid state or in its molten state, if you want to call that. But it moved around and created these interesting flows on how it moves. So I like to emulate that as much as I can. you know, by starting off the canvas and kind of coming in, maybe twisting my brush a little bit, maybe sideways again for a while. And I'm going to just kind of work my way across this whole page. And it's up to you how much veining you want to put on your marble, but I'm going to play with quite a bit. I'm going to kind of do this. When I look at I keep referring to my sample. When I see there's quite a bit here, there's some down here, there's all these big, wide, smooshy ones. There's little ones too. So I'm going to first start off and continue with using the white veining, and then I might make a lighter gray veining to kind of go over it as well. So it's up to you how much you want to play with this. All right, so I'm going to be quiet for a little bit and just kind of keep pulling veins through. And I like following all the way through across the whole page and off the other side. Remember, this is a cut of marble out of a bigger rock. Veining doesn't just go and stop. It goes, and it goes either down into the marble going at an angle, or maybe it came out of the marble. But we're going to keep making this all the way across to kind of make it more realistic looking. All right, lighter touch, finer lines. Thicker paint means brighter. It's more, stands out more. More water and more medium means it's more transparent. We want to play with all these different values, all these consistencies to really work our marble. Okay, you see I added some more medium and gray to this in order to get this kind of vein. Don't do them all gray, or all white. Add some gray ones in there. If your marble is a different color, maybe you want to add some, look at the different types of veins. Maybe there are different colors. Maybe there are blue veins. Maybe they're gray veins. Maybe they're all kinds of different ones. So I'm using the same palette we used before for rag rolling, everything else, and putting all these little extra veins in here. All right. Kind of moving quickly. I'm trying not to think about it too much. Just kind of put some paint down and keep moving. It's a very organic looking thing. So don't make this like you're trying to draw. I just kind of want to make lines, and just wherever it goes, it goes. Look, it'll look more natural that way. You see, like some of the stuff I put on is very thin in its paint. So I see, I just put a whole bunch right here, and I can see right through it to all the dots I spattered earlier. That's what I'm talking about when I say looking for transparency and translucency. It allows us to see through the thin paint that we just put on there. You know. All right, so continue this as long as you like, you know, until you're happy with it. Sometimes you don't, you know, need to put a ton. You don't need to overdo it. We get it for scenic work that it's marble, it's got veining. So we don't have to spend forever on this, but I think that looks pretty good as far as veining. I think I'm in the same kind of world. So yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm going to move on to our next step, which I think we decided was our washes. Doing a few washes on top of this, that way we would create sort of this puddly effect, kind of like what we found over here. All right, I'll see you in a bit. Step 5 that we chose was to do sort of washes on top, a medium wash. We often call this type of a wash a glaze. We use a lot of these terms kind of interchangeably, which is probably incorrect, but in this case, what we're going to use is the same color palette we've been using, but I'm going to use the flat brush. I'm going to use a lot of glaze in my washi paint that I've been using so that I get more of the medium and less of the pigment, because I don't want to go opaque. I want to go very transparent again. So water and a little bit of my my medium, and I'm using the gray. So whenever I look at my sample again, I have sort of gray areas. I have some more whitish areas and little spots. So I'm going to play with sort of a gray glaze and a white glaze. And I am fine with just going right on top of all the work that I did. And you can see I'm kind of pushing it around. I'm putting it on top of areas and mushing it around. Now, I'm not going to let this dry all the way. I'm going to push them on here. I'm pushing right on top of all the work I did, but I'm not covering everything. I'm covering certain areas, kind of pushing it around. If I think it's too thick, I can grab some tissue and I can pull it up a little bit, pull some of that paint off. That's okay. But you can see what it's doing is it's kind of making the whole thing feel more cohesive. This is what I call the cohesive step, because it now starts to feel like it all fits together. It all is part of the same marble now. I'm going to leave areas where I'm not going to cover though. I'm going to paint a little bit here, a little bit there, maybe up here. Leave little, in theater, we call them holidays, painted areas that are missed. And in this case, we want to have holidays. I'm going to go to my little white mix this time, and I add some of that white and add that in there. Again, I'm going to use plenty of medium, so we have good fluid. It'll move a lot easier if it has medium in it, and add some white. All right, and I'm going to kind of pull it off to see how it's moving, and I can add some of these areas. It's a little more white, a little light gray, and that's that puddly looking thing that I was talking about in my original one. So this is again a lighter gray using the same areas, the same kind of the same color palette that we've been using. And I might take my little paper towel here and dab up some of this just so that it's not so thick. But let's compare. How are we doing? Boy, I feel pretty good about that. You could almost say it's from the same marble. I feel very good about that. So I'm going to dry this and I'm going to call this finished. The only other step that we would do on stage that would be the final step is the final glaze. I didn't give you guys any polyurethane or any glazing sheen glaze material to do a finish. We call that the finish. So this step here will be where you will stop. So you're welcome to go back if you're uncomfortable with certain areas. You want to add more veining. Maybe you want some veins to pop out more. That would be acceptable. You know, maybe I want to go in with some of the white. Maybe I really want to punch up some of my white marks here or there. You know, you can do that if you really want to be futzy about it. I'm doing one already, right? So you can add this in while everything is still wet. You end up getting some nice little marks that look really nice in this. But overall, I think this would be perfectly acceptable on stage. And I think we'll leave it. All right. So I hope you've enjoyed this. The next step after this was, now that you're confident in your application of the paint, we now would take this same process and we feel comfortable with all the steps. We understand how to color mix. We understand the consistency of our paint to medium to water in all the different steps. I recommend making notations along the way. And now you want to translate that right onto your cornice and your column project. You will have to probably tape out with a painter's tape these areas here so that you don't have a bleed onto your sky. But that shouldn't be too much. You might be able to actually cheat that quite a bit by using either your filbert brush or a flat brush to get all these little nooks and crannies, and try to carefully build your layers. The place where it gets troublesome is when you start doing things like spattering, or that pulling going all the way through an area, so it doesn't feel like you started here and ended right here, that it actually was a piece of a larger block of marble. So you can either tape this out, or you can use a piece of cardboard, like a thin, like even a business card kind of, or cardstock to put right here. Start on the cardstock and then come into your actual paint. That allows you to kind of cut that edge nice and cleanly. So work from your sample onto your actual final project, and we'll see you at the end of that one. So hopefully you'll have all of your marble surface painted. All right. Good luck. We'll see you in the next one.